Good afternoon, Composition 1. Welcome back. Thank you for your submissions, and some people sent some nice emails after I gave your feedback earlier this week. All students should have received it, so if you haven't, please contact me. But as far as I know, all 20 students have received their feedback individually. So there has been some inquiries about further feedback and more detail about the issues that each student has. And I will be honest, that is always difficult to focus on an individual student when you have 20 students in a class and you're trying to improve everybody's writing skills. I try to give as much advice as possible, and I try to be specific as well. However, it's too time consuming to fix everybody's, I shouldn't say fix, but to try to improve everybody's writing skills. It's too time consuming to go through every person's paper with a fine tooth comb, if you know what I mean. Carefully go through it. It's not possible. So there's a certain amount of general feedback that I give, and then the sample that I took from your graded assignment was a section which I made corrections to, which they included grammatical corrections and sort of structural corrections as well. So I thought that we would put down the textbook for this week because of the request for further feedback, because if we were actually in the classroom, we would be able to do sort of what I call a writing workshop, where you would be able to write, and as you were writing, I would be able to walk around and talk to you about what you were doing as you were doing it, which is actually pretty much impossible right now. Although I've learned some new things about Zoom, which could facilitate this kind of environment where I could you could show me and I could look at it and I could break away from, the whole class and focus on you individually. I was not aware that the program was that flexible. So this is late in the term. We only have a few weeks left. So we'll just continue with this approach that we're using. And what I would like to do today is just give you I'm going to take some of the common mistakes that pretty much all of you have to deal with to a greater or lesser extent. The grades were quite good. Don't feel bad if you got C. That's going to happen. Writing takes a long time to improve. And if you did get a C, some students wanted to know what they need to improve specifically. So I'm going to help you with that today. And we're almost using an absolute grading policy this semester, so you don't need to be worried about being hyper competitive. I know this is Korean society, basically, where there's a certain amount of people that make it and some people don't, but that situation has been relaxed. So you should also relax a little bit. I know you're uptight because you just came from high school and there was a bottleneck at the end of high school to try and get into the best universities. So you're survivors of that situation, so I understand. But we are kind of in a unique situation right now where I have to try and respond to all of you as much as I can individually and as a group. So today, in order to be more efficient, I'm going to talk to you about 3 things that all of you can work on. And let me just say that native speakers don't have a huge advantage over you in your writing. I think, Koreans are often sensitive about their English ability, and if you're from another country, that might be the case as well. I studied French when I was young, so I always like to share my experience with my students, especially as it relates to writing and grammar, because I took French in university as an elective. My major was English and my minor was psychology, and I took French essentially because I didn't want to lose my French, and some of you who are not English majors might be doing this as well. You're in the class because you want to improve your language skills, not because that is your major, but just because you would feel like at some point you might need to use those language skills, and if you don't practice and try to improve, you will lose. Yeah, so that's what happens. My French is pretty horrible now because I've been in Korea for 13 years and I haven't practiced. So when I was in university, I took French class and I did fine. I got a B plus, I believe. I have to check that, but I got a B anyway. And the main issue was my grammar. Basically the professor said, organization is pretty good, content is pretty good, your grammar is horrible. That interferes with the ability to effectively communicate the good ideas, and the structure is there so the professor could follow it, but it was tedious to go through it because there were so many mistakes. I just remember getting my papers back and getting the B's consistently, and it just being covered with red marks. And he was nice enough to correct a lot of the things that I did. He was attempting to help me improve, but I didn't really improve. So perhaps it's better for me, rather than just handing you back a whole bunch of papers that are covered with corrections. I used a word processor, so it wasn't by hand, but I normally do it by hand. But I sent them by email, so I just I tracked the markings and I sent them back to you. So you've seen your typical mistakes, but I think it would be helpful for me to explain exactly what I mean when I say these things to you in your feedback, and I say this is what you need to improve. Okay, so this is what we're going to focus on today. So as I said, there are 3 things. The first one is very easy to explain. I've asked you to write 1 page. Some students have been a little bit confused about this double-spaced idea. So basically, some students essentially put 2 spaces between each line, which actually that turns out to be triple-spaced. So the length of your entire paper, I'm looking for about 200 to 300 words, essentially. So some students were concerned that they went over a page by a few lines. When you get to a page and a half, you have to stop because you're getting closer to 2 pages than 1, okay? So the guidelines were 1 page, double space. So it should be 1 line, a space, another line, space, another line. That's double spaced. Some students did a triple space thing, which means there was 2 spaces between each line, which that turns out to be a very short paragraph. Not what I was looking for. So if that was your criticism, if that was my criticism of your paper, that's very easy to fix. Just essentially you need to increase the length, and if you didn't finish the page, if you triple spaced and you didn't finish the page, it ended up being like half as long as what I was expecting. So in that case, you probably lost some points, right? That probably reduced your grade from a B to a C, perhaps. So it's very simple. If your paragraph is not complete, it's not developed enough, it doesn't have enough content, every other student has written 2 or 3 times as long an assignment as you, then you're at a disadvantage. Don't worry about it too much because that's easy to fix. There's 1 more assignment, and that's the easiest thing to fix. Write more. If I told you that, write more. Now, what you don't need to write more of is in your introduction. When you're talking about an exceptional person, if you started out by saying, there are lots of special people in the world, and I think that the most important thing about an exceptional person is success. To be successful, you need to do this. And you started, generally describing about the concept, the idea of an exceptional person, and explaining or defining what an exceptional person is. That is fine if you're writing a long paper. If the paper is 5 pages or 10 pages, you can go into that detail if you want. But if I ask you to write 1 page, and you spend half your paragraph just talking generally about the idea of being exceptional, then when you finally get to the person, you basically just say very briefly what the person did, and then the paragraph is over and the page is done, which is not what I was looking for. What I was looking for was a summary of the person, about their life and their characteristics, and some analysis, like for you to reflect on it afterwards, would make much more sense and would be much more valuable to the person, because I really wanted you to focus on the individual, not on explaining or introducing what an exceptional person would be. So, as I said to you, sometimes the paragraphs in the textbook are not really helpful that way, because that's the paragraph in the textbook did demonstrate that. So I understand where you're coming from when you look at an example in the textbook, but that really, I'm going to say that example, like I explained to you, it really didn't really analyze, and it really didn't develop the paragraph enough. So that paragraph, and many of the paragraphs that are examples in the book, we should criticize them, and we should look how to be better than what's in the textbook. I know treating it as an example is tempting, but it's really not a model for you to follow. It's just kind of a really basic blueprint, which you need to improve on. If you want to be a good writer, you can do much better than that. This is, the introductory book, and so we're easing into it. But let's just be clear. In the next assignment, I would like you to get into the topic quickly, rather than doing some sort of general introduction for multiple sentences, which sort of waste space in your one-page paper. I would like you to get right into the topic as soon as possible. That topic sentence should be there right at the beginning. Basically, in this assignment, the best thing that students did was maybe one sentence to introduce the topic, and then the second sentence was, this is why I chose the Albert Einstein. Okay? Because you said something like, an exceptional person, the thing I respect the most about an exceptional person is intelligence, right? Period. That is why I decided to write this paragraph about Albert Einstein. And then from there, you went directly into a description of Albert Einstein's qualities, his life, his characteristics, and then you explained the significance of him, or what your perspective on his contributions to science and society were, and that kind of structure deserves an A. Okay? So, secondly, coherence is something that I've sort of generally talked about continuously. Some of it is just a matter, it's more sort of like a grammatical thing almost. It's where you need to choose the right connectors. And I did give you a lecture about this, so I think the timing of the lecture was a little bit belated, unfortunately. I should have done that lecture a week or two earlier, and that would have been more beneficial to you, because you would have had those more options. But this is what some of you are needing to use different connectors. You have to make sure that the relationship between the ideas is shown through the transition words or the conjunctions. So we've already talked about this a little bit, but you also have to remember, it's not just those connecting words, it's the ideas themselves. If you decide to talk about something, and then one idea is not connected to the other, and there isn't a good relationship between it, then the problem is not the connecting word. The problem is that perhaps that idea doesn't match, and it's not logical. So the second sentence should be removed. And we've talked about this too, is when you go through the process of editing, often when you write, if you just write, as I said, writing is a process. So if you just write continuously without stopping, and then you read back, you might find that some of the sentences that you wrote sort of drift away from the main topic. And God forbid I watch all of my videos someday and I look at all these lectures. the same thing is true. Like when I stand in front of you and I speak to the screen, normally I don't have the ability to watch myself. But if I go back and I look and I say, well, I'm talking about something, but then gradually I'm starting to get off topic. And if I had the ability and a team to help me, I would edit those sections out. But that's not the case. I'm doing this, this is pre-recorded and you get to watch it whenever, but I sort of deal with these lectures like it's live. So the same mistakes that I would make in the classroom, I'm making in front of you right now. So, I mean, that's probably more realistic. So there's that. But you have to remember that when you're writing, you have the opportunity to edit, and you can, unlike when you do a speech and you mess up, you can't take that back. You're just going to have to keep plowing through it. And some people are really good at continuing to go through that despite obstacles and mistakes and errors, and even, you might even contradict yourself and say something that's against what you previously said. And that's a big danger. I mean, that's the worst kind of error in terms of coherence, is that you say something at the beginning of your paper and then later you say the opposite. And that, of course, it's a serious logical error, and it's going to really diminish the effectiveness of your paper. So you have to make sure that the ideas that you use are connected to each other, and to facilitate that, to make it more effective, those connecting words are very helpful. Okay, so you can refer to the link that I gave you about the connecting words. They're a huge list, and also the lecture that I gave you earlier this semester about transition words and conjunctions. That will be helpful for you to improve that. The most serious thing across all students has been grammar. And like I said, I totally understand that, because that was my own personal issue when I was doing my own studies in second language throughout high school and into university. I never really figured out how to improve my grammar. I think that all the grammar lessons that I had, because I was in French for over 10 years, that they were kind of routine and they were repetitive, and I just did them mechanically, and I was never very good at them, but I passed the tests and everything. And I got B's in grammar stuff throughout. I never did very well at it. I was much better at speaking. And I think it was partly because it's just boring. And a lot of people don't like studying grammar, and I don't particularly like teaching it. So my strategy has been, for the last 10 years of teaching English to mostly students who speak, like 99%, over 99% have been students who are using English as a second language. My strategy has been to sort of passively teach grammar. So just by using examples, essentially, it's like, this is a grammar point, but I don't say this is a grammar lesson. I just sort of talk about it. Sort of the way that I did with the coherence just now. Although it's sort of related in an oblique way to grammatical structure, I think the word grammar just makes people lose their attention sometimes. That's how it works with me. Like, as soon as the French class turned towards, okay, now we're going to get our grammar books out and let's do some verb tables, and this is l'imparfait, and this is futur, and this is whatever. Passé composé. These are all tenses. These are verb tenses, and I was never good at it. So conjugating verbs for me in French was always a problem. But this is a very important thing. The reason that my teachers drilled us with verb grammar and how to put verbs in the right tense is because it's so important. If you say something in the past, it indicates a different situation. If you say it in the present or the future. So those of you who I said, pay attention to your verb tense, I mean, that's what you got to do. If you're talking about something like a person, an exceptional person, you're talking about their life, and it's all looking back on that person's life. You just have to try to be consistent and just stick every verb you use in the past tense. If you're making general statements, like you did in your introductions, some of you, you're going to use the present simple, right? If something's happening now and you're discussing the person in the present for some reason, like they're doing something today, right now, and you're looking at them like you're watching them do something at the moment, then you're going to use present continuous. Probably for the exceptional person, there wasn't much in terms of opportunities for future tense, unless at the end you're analyzing the person in saying that you are expecting them to do something in the future even more, improve themselves, or right. So just pay attention to when the action is happening and try and concentrate on that. If that is your issue, this is my best advice, is that I think you know how to form the past and the present and the future, and just stay away from the other complicated tenses for the most part. Just because that's verb tense is your issue, maybe this will be helpful. If I didn't say anything about your verb tense, go ahead and use all the different tenses if you want. But those 4 main tenses I mentioned, the past simple, the present simple, present continuous, and the future, that's a strategy to manage, to minimize the amount of mistakes so that the context of what you're saying is communicated effectively. So that's what I would recommend. The second most common mistake, not most common, I think they're equally common. Prepositions often are quite difficult for Korean students. As I understand it, my Hangul is not great, but as I understand it, postpositions are, follow nouns normally, and in Korean. So just the position, the syntax itself is difficult, and the correct usage, which one should be used, is also sometimes a problem. So I'm going to refer you to a couple websites. There's sort of infographics with lists. Like I said last time, I don't want to, infringe on anybody else's work or copyright. And I have my own website, so I don't want anybody to copy my website and post what I create somewhere else. So I will be respectful of other people's websites for that reason, and because it's illegal. But I've found some lists that I think would be very helpful for you. So I will refer you to them on the website after I upload this video lecture, in the same way that I did with the list of transitions and conjunctions. And you can download them individually if you want, but you should go to the website and then get the information from that website, because that website has made the list themselves. So you can get that information from those websites, from the links that I will post on my website, and that's the correct way to do it. So briefly, I usually, first of all, I try to distinguish between at, in, and on. Very simply, maybe you've already heard this, so I don't want to belabor the point, but let's just say that if you're talking about location, at and in and on are the most important prepositions. So at would be a point or a room or a building. Say it's just a point somewhere. Usually I take my marker and I just I don't have a proper eraser. It's a point, right? So that's a dot. If it's a distinct specific location, then you use the word at. If you have a line where somewhere along the line there is something, like on the river or on the road, that's basically a line. If you're picking a position on the line, then you use on. If you're talking about a location and there is a location within a space, inside a space, like a circle and a dot inside the circle, then you say in. For example, in the city or in the forest. Okay? And now you might say on the mountain, because I guess on the mountain might be considered a line. So you have to be careful. Sometimes it's not as intuitive as you would think. But generally that works. If it's within a space, it's in. If it's a line, then it's on. And if it's a point, then it's at. So there's some kind of tricks to follow these things, but generally you just have to get comfortable with the usage of the prepositions, because in your language it's not the same. If you're not Korean, it might even be more complicated to figure out how to use prepositions in English. I'm not sure. So I will provide you with a few links, at, in, on, or for example, out, by, or for, and from, because when you're discussing ideas, you end up saying from and for and by and out all the time. So those are very important. So I will provide links for you to go to the websites where they have lists, so that if you're checking your writing and you're trying to improve those mistakes, then you can just quickly click on the link and say, there it is. I shouldn't be saying for, I should be saying from. Because they have a lot of examples in the list, more than I can tell you through my video. So I'll refer you to those websites for your benefit. Okay, so that is it. Those are 3 things that all of you can probably work on. Like I said, some people have more serious mistakes than others, but in a general, for most of you, almost all of you, these are the major concerns from the assignment, the first assignment. So this is just to add to the feedback that I gave you individually, to help you improve for the second one. And like I said, don't be too concerned about the letter grade. Nobody got less than a C, which is not normal. Usually there are some people that really have more serious errors than what you are producing. So I think for the most part, you're doing a great job, and you just don't lose your confidence because you didn't get an A this time. I've gotten plenty of B's and C's, and now I'm a professor, and I'm trying to encourage you to, you need to be a little bit resilient, because the progression of your writing ability will go up and down. At least that was the case with me, and that's normal. If you just get straight A's all the time, there are people like that. I'm jealous of those people too, but that's not the way my writing progressed. And once you get to a certain level, even the really talented writers have to do a lot of editing and a lot of adjusting and proofreading in order to get something ready to be published. So just, keep making an effort and you will be rewarded. All right. Thank you for listening, and I will talk to you again soon next week. Keep working hard on your writing, and I appreciate the positive feedback through the emails. Have a good day.